Okay, let me jump to the trust issue. Again, I'm going to use the same two data sets. I'm going to flip it this time. I'm going to use the survey data first, and then I'm going to jump into the qualitative data. Oops. And what I think that the two of them do, we can't compare them apples to apples. Let me just make that point. The two approaches have very different intentions, and we have two different subjects in each of those projects. But they tell us something more together that I think they do apart. So let me jump into that. So in terms of who is trusted in sort of relative terms, science and extension are at the top, and in this case that would be Penn State and Cornell for the most part. We didn't ask about specific institutions, but since we asked Pennsylvania and New York. Those are the two primary research institutions. Followed by the environmental groups in DEP or DEC, Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection and New York's Department of Environmental Conservation, the two agencies responsible for regulating the industry. Relatively high, I thought, actually. 57% felt that they could trust them. Followed by the industry at 48%, natural gas task forces, which were not occurring in all of the counties, or are not now. I think at the time of the survey, there were probably about 10 or 12 across the region. And then at the bottom of the list, Susquehanna River Basin Commission and the Delaware River Basin Commission. But note that about a third of the people just didn't know what they would think of them. Okay. So this gives us a relative sense. When we asked in the qualitative interviews how people thought about these organizations, we got a sense of where the trust might be coming from, or what might be generating trust and distrust for each of these organizations. So for the industry, when we think about that fiduciary responsibility, that obligation to the people, trust was generally generated if they were consistent in communication, if they were transparent about the process, and they were perceived as being fair. And this was often in terms of the leasing conversations. So if the communication in line is open, we start to develop a little bit of trust. Trust with the ones that we are dealing with. If you talked to the same representative and heard the same thing, everybody got the same information. It was all very transparent and above board. Where there was distrust in the industry, it tended to be because there was a feeling that the industry had taken advantage of landowners, particularly their lack of knowledge about the Marcellus early. For those landmen who went out and signed people up very early before there was a lot of talk of Marcellus and a perception of its potential enormity. They took advantage of previous history with leasing, especially for coal and shallow gas. People thought it was the same thing. You know, I'm going to lease for $2, $5 an acre. They may or may not come out, but it's an easy way to get a few bucks. Whereas Marcellus is different. It's a different realm. So part of the issue is lack of transparency, asymmetry of information related to the process. Especially, we all heard about the issue with lack of disclosure of what's in the frac fluids. This was before there was mandated disclosure. And so that was an issue for people not trusting the industry. If they're not going to tell us what's in there, how can I trust them about what they're telling me? Perceptions of the motives of the industry. Are they in it to... So some people thought, you know, they're here to drill. They're going to do the best they can for the landowners. They'll be helpful for us. Others, no, I don't trust anybody. They're here because they're going to make a buck. I got to protect myself. So lots of different perceptions about that issue. The competence of the industry wasn't very much questioned. Only a couple people brought up, you know, this is new. Can they really manage it? Do they really understand all of what they're doing? Has this been fully tested by them? But that was relatively minor. It was mostly having to do with the fiduciary responsibility component. And then this predictability issue also comes up. When the market tanked in late 2008, some of the companies had trouble paying their lease offers that they had made. And they either didn't pay, they took a long time to pay, or they offered alternative arrangements with people. And that created a sense of, oh, wait a minute, can we really trust them? Are they even doing what they said they would do in the contract that we have? if we can't trust them through the contract, how are we supposed to trust them in other means? So that was brought up with a handful of folks as well. Turning to the state regulatory agencies, the DEP and the DEC, fiduciary responsibility wasn't the main issue for those folks. In many cases, they felt, the people we interviewed said, you know what, they're trying their best. They have in their hearts the right idea. They're trying to protect people, they're trying to protect the water resources. And they felt that the commitment was there. What was questioned, one decision that was questioned was the removal of authority of the local conservation districts. I'm trying to remember when that happened. It was right about the time we were doing the interviews. I want to say summer or fall of '09.
It was January of 08, I think.
Was it that early? Okay.
It might have been 09, but it was early in one of those years.
Okay. So that the removal of that authority, which is a local element of the permitting process, when that was taken out of that permitting process, people felt that they weren't sure what was going on, who was going to be making these decisions, how were the local issues going to be part of that decision-making process. In most cases, what was questioned about the DEP and DEC was their competence, their ability to manage this new beast, this different technology, a different approach to drilling. Do they have the capacity, especially in a time when budgets are being slashed? And do they have the needed expertise with this new technology? And then a few people talked about DEP particularly. This didn't come up in New York. I'm not saying that it wouldn't, but it didn't. With them being more reactionary than proactive. That they only come out and fine people after the fact. They don't help establish good regulations and good practices beforehand. And so there were some people thinking that, can they then deal with that predictability, or excuse me, the reversibility issue? If there is a problem, is it too late? Can they protect up front? State government, we didn't ask about this in the survey. I'm sort of kicking myself about that now. But it came up quite a bit in the interviews. And this, in most cases, has to do with fiduciary responsibility related to integrity. And in most cases, it has to do with, do they have ulterior motives? Are they after the Marcellus only for the money that it can bring to the state coffers? And it was a little bit different discussion in Pennsylvania and New York, just given the different policy environments. But the indecision on the severance tax and the questions about how it would be distributed and the multiple bills that were part of that process created some concerns for a lot of people. I trust the gas industry more than I do the state. It's a fine line, but I think the state has ulterior motives. They see a gold mine, trying to get the money out of it for the budget. In New York, mixed feelings about the moratorium. For some people, it was a chance to get things right, get the pieces in place to protect the people and the environment. For other people, they thought, you know what, by the time we get on the scene, all the good money is going to be in Pennsylvania. We're not going to be able to get the money here for the business development and the piping and all of that. So trying to tie those two together. So in that conceptual model, I talked about how institutional trust relates to the perceptions of the risk. And this is just a straight regression model showing the correlates of showing the correlates of the risk perception items. And what's at the top of the list is trust in the natural gas industry. I'm trying to remember, this was probably like 0.35 or something. And then all the things that go along with that. Their expectations about how environmental quality change, their expectations about how jobs might change, their attitudes about the environment, and other implications, their knowledge of the potential implications. And then again, trust in local environmental groups. So this trust issue pops up as pretty important when thinking about how people perceive the risks. Everything from here down is a really, really low correlation, but I included it just to make sure that I was being complete. Also interesting, I think, is that women perceive higher risks than men associated with this, and that's pretty consistent finding across risk literature. And then towards the bottom, again, it's very small, but lower trust in science institutions. And so this is kind of starting to paint a picture of people who are trusting some groups of people, not trusting others, and then how they filter that information. The kinds of information that they're willing to believe, and then the expectations that they have based on that information.